Well, joining us now is a woman who's called herself merely an average human being who optimally uses her talent. Well, that's hardly true, because if you could tap the ambition and drive that pulse through Smriti Irani, you could power India's entire electric grid and then some. She's an absolute rocket in terms of her career. So thanks so much for being here, Minister.
Thank you.
And you've come, of course, straight from Paris, where you were at a UNESCO conference and laid a wreath at the Bataclan Center. How did you find the mood in Paris?
I think that when the decision was taken to go to Paris, we were aware that many nations were backing off. And I felt as a minister that the best way to show solidarity is to show up in Paris. And when I went to Bataclan, I was extremely astonished to see that instead of terror dissuading people to land up to pay respects and homage, people came in hordes. They came irrespective of color, they came irrespective of gender, they came irrespective of class or nationality. And I think in front of that theater, everyone was a Parisian.
Incredibly moving it must have been. Well, events in Paris were driven, of course, by angry young men deprived of opportunity. And India is a very young nation, and you have millions of young people graduating with degrees, but job creation continues to be a challenge. Do you ever think about those things and worry about the same kind of anger ever building up amongst young people?
I think that in India, we have the cornerstone of the mother who inspires us to soak in the anger and use it productively. I think every mother who's sitting here today, every woman who's sitting here today, might have one story or the other of how she's channelized the anger of her child towards something more creative. And God bless those mothers, because that is, I think, the rock on which salvation lies for our country. And not only education, but the mother's will to ensure that her child is on the path of peace, her child is on the path of prosperity, and her child turns out to be a contributor towards society and not a destructor.
That's such an interesting observation, because one of our themes at Women in the World today is women as peacemakers and women as interveners. So I haven't heard that idea before that you've voiced, but it's interesting. Well, of course, you started working for your father when you were 16, and you didn't actually go to college yourself, but you succeeded anyway. What drove you so hard so young?
I have said this before and I say it today. When I think I had a moment in life where I said to myself that I have lived a few years as my father's daughter, and I foresaw that I will live a few years as somebody's wife, and I wanted to be me. And I think the decision to be me is what egged me on to join a business, get into media, and be a part of politics.
And you went from being a model to being a TV actress, and very short time ago you were really struggling to make ends meet. Tell me a little bit about that period before you were the famous minister.
I think before I was a famous minister, I was a comfortably off actor.
Before you were a comfortably off actor, because you didn't just
But yeah,
get
I
there.
think the days of struggle, when one looks back, seem unique to each individual who is projected in the media. But we all have our own little struggles. Mine was not the fact that I didn't have much money. Mine was to get a place under the sun and have people understand that I had the capacity to deliver as an actor, as an individual. And there are many a times where I was shushed away, told I'm not good enough in terms of my looks to be an actor. There were times when I was told I didn't look like the quintessential housewife. And,
That's a
and
compliment.
I think that the transition from somebody who was not good enough to somebody who was given an opportunity is for me something that I hold dear. And that opportunity was given to me by a woman, Ekta, who celebrated in the field of television. I looked at her, I said, you've given me this opportunity, now trust me. I know what I'm doing, I know what to do in my job. And I think the fact that I had her trust is what helped me become a better actor and achieve something and go from rags to the riches people talk about.
That's great. Well, while still working as an actor full time, of course, you joined the BJP in 2003. Why that party and why then? Why did you make that turn?
Well, I think what is not much known is that I am from a Swayamsevaks family, ideologically from the same family. BJP is a political organization, and for many a years, I worked as a social worker, as we call it in India. I was the USAID ambassador to India from the year 2001 onwards till 2003, and I felt that till I was the USAID ambassador, I should not be in active Indian politics. I also recognize that some of my colleagues said that it's okay to contribute piecemeal to somebody's life, But if you want things to turn for the better, then you need to be part of a policy initiative. And that is only possible if you're part of a political entity or organization. So this was ideologically my parivar, and that's why I'm here.
And who got you in to make that move?
There's a gentleman who's no longer amongst us. He was a cabinet minister called Sri Gopinath Munde. He has 3 daughters of his own, and he saw this child in me who wanted to make a difference, who would pick the fights which not many would want to pick. And he said that this is the path that you should choose. And I said, would you advise your daughter to do the same? He said, absolutely.
And so you did. Well, in 2004, shortly before you joined the party, after the riots in Gujarat, you were deeply critical of Mr. Modi at that time, then Chief Minister, and you actually threatened to starve yourself into death if he didn't resign. But now you're a minister in his government. So what happened? What changed your mind about Mr. Modi?
I think that I am a living example of Mr. Modi's capacity to forgive. I am a living example of Mr. Modi's capacity to recognize talent and to reason. And I feel that in 2004, when he met me, he said, don't judge me by newspaper articles. Judge me by my work. See the work firsthand. And then tell me what kind of an administrator I am. I think he was magnanimous then because I was just a youngster in politics. There was no need for him to give me that opportunity, that explanation, or even engage with me. And ever since I've been on a path of good governance, I've seen the projects happen. I have vocally expressed my support for not only the work that he has done, but also having him positioned as the BJP prime ministerial candidate. And I feel that today I'm again an example of the fact that he's magnanimous.
Well, then you had a very fast rise, of course, Vice President of the BJP's Youth Wing, Party's National Secretary, All India President of the Women's Wing, and of course now, 2014, you become the head of the Human Resource Development Ministry. So how did you win his trust to get such fast, amazing, rocketing through these different
I
positions?
think that there are 2 people who trusted me, knowing that I have the capacity to deliver. One was Ekta Kapoor in the field of media, and one was Narendra Modi in politics. And both realized that when given an opportunity, I do deliver. I mean, it's shocking that I just had Sunita Menon walk in, who was very close to Ekta, and everybody at that time spoke about my audacity to look in the face of everything and say, I will succeed.
Well, one of the things I'm fascinated by is the way you take on these really, really difficult fights. I mean, in 2014, you ran against Rahul Gandhi, the standard bearer of the Congress party. And I mean, everybody thought that was an unwinnable fight, and indeed, it wasn't successful, but it was a really good fight. So why did you take that on? I mean, most people would have just said, I can't win that one. I'm not going to go there. Let somebody else take that one.
Well, my mom said it best. She said that we women take on the impossible fights and ultimately win the battle of life. So I took on a fight. For 20 days, I reduced Mr. Gandhi's margin by 84% in a bastion which was flourished by his family for over 6 decades. And I went to that fight when the Congress was in power at the center. Many said, aren't you afraid that you will be a bit unsafe there? I said, well, I've left my family in safe hands and I'm here to fight the fight alone. But I was not alone. I had my organization and I had people coming from all walks of life, all over the country, not many ideologically inclined towards the Bharatiya Janata Party. But for them, this was a fight between a person who was born into a family where they were entitled to rule and a person who came from absolutely nowhere, but was reflective of an India that gives you an opportunity to succeed if you have the will, the grit, and the talent. So I think it was a fight not between 2 individuals, but between 2 ideas in India.
So do you relish that? It's pretty brave.
Do I relish being the underdog?
Yes, do you relish being the underdog being the scrappy one? I mean,
no, I think what I relish possibly is the fact that I don't have to seek anybody's permission to get into a fight. What I relish possibly is the fact that I get into a fight and I learn something new, something that makes me better as a human being. And no fight has ever left me wounded enough to not get back up again.
Right. That's impressive. Well, so then you took it on the daunting task of a daunting portfolio, really, of education. I mean, did you find, that's an interesting portfolio to take on in view of your kind of self-made history and your lack of, you didn't go into academia, or you've never been in academia or anything of that kind. and you're the youngest minister in his cabinet. Did you find that a daunting portfolio? Is that the one you wanted?
No, I think this question was asked of me when I got into the media business in the year 2001 by a very celebrated anchor called Karan Thapar. He said, weren't you afraid and nervous that you were stepping in alone into uncharted territory? I just saw that interview just last night, and I felt that, my God, where did I get that confidence to look at him and say a vehement no? And I did the same when I entered politics. I didn't choose the portfolio. I was chosen for the portfolio. So that has to be said. But I think that no one else more than people like me can appreciate the value of education. There is a Sanskrit shlok which says, Vidya dadati vinayam, which means with education and true knowledge comes humility, comes humanity. And when I look at people, there are many who tried to tear me down, who mocked me for being illiterate. I looked at them and I kept thinking of that Sanskrit shlok, and I felt that if they don't have that humility, that humanity, that decency to engage with me on ideas without being caustic in their remarks, then possibly they're not as knowledgeable as they seem.
Well, of course, there is a lot of controversy now at the moment around what's happening in India in realms of education and intellectual life. Textbooks for grades 1 to 12 are currently being revised. The concerns are that the committees making these decisions don't fully represent India's plurality.
I think someone's done your research wrong.
Okay, so they're not being revised?
No, we actually, after 3 decades, looking at having a new education policy. Much has changed in the world and in the sector of education, but our policy doesn't reflect it. And constitutionally, your curriculum can only change once a policy has been derived upon. For the first time in our country's history, policy is not being made by a select few in the nation's capital. We have opened up and tested every instrument of democracy to have voices of people come forth. As of yesterday, I had 96,800 villages upload on the government site their resolution for education in their village. This is what they want out of the policy. And we have experts coming and sitting together. The ministry is equidistant because we want the people's voice to be reflected. Many told me that this is a wish that never see the light of day. It started on the 26th of January this year. And by the end of the year, we will have a policy which will reflect the true will of the people of India, those who get most affected by policy, which is the stakeholders like parents and students and institutions that are governed by law.
Well, I mean, the Times of India did report that in Rajasthan, accounts of Mughal history and iconic Muslim writers have been removed and the school curriculum has been replaced by others. Do you feel that there is now a reduction of these plural voices?
I think that one needs to recognize that education is in the concurrent list, where the center's writ will not be followed by the rest of the country. Every state has an elected government and they have the right to frame a curriculum or an education policy deemed fit by the elected representatives for their state. And I think in my capacity as a cabinet minister, I need to understand and respect the democratic right of a democratically elected state government to do as they deem fit. But I also recognize that the national policy that is being derived is a policy on which every state, irrespective of their political ideology or inclination, will have a voice. I'm fortunately one of those ministers who has got support across party lines for everything that we have done in the education sector. Because I told all my colleagues that children are not vote banks, and in the education sector lies the future of your country.
Well, of course, there is a lot of criticism about and a lot of a real perception that India is a place of diminishing free speech and ideas. Have you been disturbed by the protests and the returning of prizes? It's been, you know, in the United States, it's been had a tremendous amount of coverage.
I think the dissent is the very essence of a democracy. As an Indian, Tina, I would, request you, when you look at the dollar bill, what do you see on it? You see a quote, "In God we trust." Ask any Indian sitting in this audience today, look at your currency. It will have 17 languages on it. It will have the Mahatma's photograph on it. We as Indians celebrate and worship Lakshmi as the goddess of fortune, but we don't have Lakshmi on our currency note. That is how secular we are. And I feel that challenges are faced by many nations. This morning, I saw a tweet by a Harvard Law professor who is an African American, saying somebody blacked out all the faces of all the African American professors in Howard Law School. That is what his tweet was all about. But then there are students who reassured all of them and put up messages of support. And I feel that India is aware of its challenges, but is also adept in handling those challenges through rule of law. We Indians can take pride in that we are a nation of people where we take an oath by the constitution and not by any religious text. My prime minister is a practicing Hindu, but when he took the oath on the constitution and he released to the nation a gold bullion, it had the Ashoka Chakra, which is our national emblem. It did not have a religious inscription on it. And I think that should resonate across the world, that we are a people of diverse languages, cultures, ethos, but we stand one when it comes to the rule of law.
Well, you've had, a lot of your missions, you have a big mission now to educate the girl child, and you've spent a lot of political energy on talking about the rise of the girl child and how you want to empower the girl child. So how do you battle the intractable forces, which are often from their own families, of girls, blocking girls from progress with their education, right?
I think one of the most basic needs of a girl child to go to school was the facility of a toilet in a government school. And the Prime Minister last year from the Red Fort in the Independence Day speech said, can we see a possibility that every girl's child in a government school gets an access to a separate toilet as regards to a common toilet for girls and boys? People told me it's a statistical nightmare. We had over 250,000 government schools in the country which had no separate toilet for girls. And we had to construct in 1 year 463,000 toilets. We did it. We leveraged technology. We had a combination of human resolve. We had a cooperative federal arrangement between states. And we also engaged parents to tell us. We put up all the data online. And we implored to parents and citizens at large that we know this school has no toilet. If you think that our information is incorrect, inform us so that we go and build a toilet in for a girl child in the government school in your vicinity. And I think that miracle happened. For the first time in the history of independent India, we managed to build all these toilets in just 1 year, which means a government determined
That's a huge achievement.
and people united can bring about this basic change. I was happy to learn from some media sources that the enrollment of girls and progression of girls who are dropping out after grade 8 has increased because now they know that they don't need to relieve themselves and absent themselves from school. When they have their monthly cycle, they know that they have a facility to use.
Well, one of the big conversations in India right now is the sort of push-pull between the traditional and the modern, and the inspiring girls, and the need to kind of at the same time, they're being, as I say, forced at the same time to be traditional girls who can't get away and can't rise. And you're married with 3 children yourself. Have you had any of that inner conflicts yourself about the push-pull? No. Well, that's great. That's great to hear that.
No, I think that these challenges, and I said the push and pull as you talk about, is there in every country. I heard about stories from the US where some professor advised the students not to wear provocative Halloween costumes, and told other students to be very receptive and be respectful of a girl's right to wear a provocative costume. Now that nobody can imagine that would happen in the United States, but it does. And in India, I don't think any woman here is dictated to as to what to wear, how to wear, who to meet, when to meet. I am of the opinion, I don't think anybody is dictated here. I don't think anybody is told. Are you? You're not. You're not told, and I think that is the strength of an average Indian woman.
You're a lot of dissent in here about that.
Are you told?
You're all dissenting.
Are you told? I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm not, and my apologies, ladies. I do not come from a very celebrated family. I came from an absolute lower middle class family, and even when, may I finish? Even when I had no money in my pocket, even when I had others in the extended family tell me that I am no good because I'm a girl, I had a mother who told me, you don't need to listen to anyone, but determine your own fate. So I know we all have our challenges, but we also have those people who bring that positive reinforcement. I myself in India have seen at the India Gate, when the riots broke out for the Nirbhaya case, how fathers stood next to daughters and said, go raise your voice, fight for what is right. So I'm in a process where I embrace people who empower, who give out that positive message that we will not determine for the women in our country what they are to do. And I think that if we have a challenge where somebody is telling somebody in the United States that you can't wear provocative Halloween costumes, then this is not a challenge limited to one nation. It is a challenge that many nations across the world face.
Well, there are plenty, though, if you talk to school teachers, in the more rural areas, their frustration is that they have these girls who are bright, they have these girls who are coming to school, but their own families are basically saying, once you get to a certain point, you get back home, you get married young, you stay at home.
You know, Tina, if you look at the hard numbers, when we talk about domestic abuse, when we talk about, and I'm now going to quote from the RENA, which has the abuse index, which I've seen in the US. I've also seen it in the UK, and I've seen the National Crime Records Bureau numbers here. You'd be shocked to know that South Bombay, Mumbai as we call it, has the highest amount of female infanticide. Now that is where the so-called elite and educated live. Nobody can imagine that female infanticide will be so high there. Domestic abuse in urban centers is actually statistically more as compared to rural India. So let's not presume that a problem with regards to women's safety or women's rights is only curtailed to a rural segment and is not an urban phenomena. That would be lying to oneself. In the education business, I'm very happy to report there was a study done in a district called Ratnagiri in Maharashtra and Mumbai, and we found that the learning outcomes of mathematics, languages, and science in the rural districts of Ratnagiri, areas of Ratnagiri, are higher than Mumbai. So there are, like I said, there are challenges. These are statistics. Numbers can't lie. So to say that we can have a debate, on it. I would love to do the news hour here right now with everybody who wants to. I have no problem. And I'm sure Rajdeep is here somewhere.
Okay.
So I have no problem doing it.
Well, Minister, you've had, of course, yourself a very supportive husband, and you've raised your children. Just before we close, just everybody always wants to know your own particular domestic, juggle. We all do have the domestic juggle. How did it work for you?
When I had my first child, I told my husband very honestly that I don't think I can do this. I can't raise a baby and have a career. And my husband turned around and said, well, I have a child and I'm not giving up my career. Why should you? And but in my personal life, there have been many challenges, especially since I've got this job. My son's class teacher, just a month back in a parent-teacher meeting, told me, well, Mrs. Irani, I think you should send someone else to the meeting. I said, why, ma'am? She said, no, you're a working woman, you're always on TV, you won't have the time to raise a child.
Wow, that's...
And my son caught my hand and he said, don't say anything. I said, why? He said, because she will not look at a working mother who's irritated, she will look at the minister.
Your son sounds like he should be running for office.
Well, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I think one of my highlights and high points of this 1.5 years has been 2 incidents. She went to Malta for the World Martial Combat Competition. She's 12. And when she landed there, the Paris attack happened. She was supposed to come back to India via Paris and stay there for 2 days. And I was desperate to get her back with me, as any mother would be. And I said, can I just take you back? She says, no, Mom, you said life is to go on, so I will go back home with my team on the scheduled date, and I will roam the streets of Paris. And I think that as a parent, when you look at the 2 of them, you feel, okay, apart from all the glory and as a cabinet minister, all the pronouncements, I did raise these 2 kids right.
Well, congratulations on that. I have no doubt you have. Minister, you've been terrific today. We have run out of time. Alas, we could sit here all afternoon, but we have to wrap it up. So I really thank you for joining us. It's been great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.